Breaking news tonight in the Sarah Palin Troopergate investigation into the governor's possible abuse of power. A McCain-Palin spokesman says the governor's husband, First Dude Todd Palin, will refuse to testify in the inquiry, even though he was issued a subpoena. Not responding to subpoenas. Why does this seem so depressingly familiar? The First Dude news comes as a state lawmaker said tonight that lack of cooperation by key witnesses will likely derail the investigation until after the presidential election. The question being investigated is simple. Did Sarah Palin fire Public Safety Officer Walt Monaghan for refusing to fire a state trooper who was involved in a nasty divorce with Sarah Palin's sister? Before she was selected as the GOP's vice presidential pick, Palin denied wrongdoing and said she welcomed the investigation. In fact, she told the public to hold her accountable. But McCain aides have now questioned the integrity of the inquiry, even though it was launched after a 14-0 bipartisan vote in the state legislature. As of tonight, remarkably, this investigation appears safely quashed until after the election, until after its findings might be of really big political consequence to Americans who don't live in Alaska. Joining us now is Newsweek's investigative correspondent, Michael Isikoff. Hi, Mike. Thanks for joining us again. Mr. Isikoff, what is the status of Troopergate right now?
Well, it seems to be crashing into a stone wall. The subpoenas were voted by the Senate Judiciary Committee of the Alaska Legislature just last Friday. It now appears that none of the subpoenas for the aides to Governor Palin and her husband, First Dude Todd Palin, are going to be honored. There's a meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee in Anchorage tomorrow, and it doesn't appear that anybody who was subpoenaed is going to show up. And so the question then becomes, where does it go from here? The bipartisan members who voted these subpoenas can refer this to the state Senate. There could be a full vote to hold in contempt the witnesses in contempt by the full state Senate, which could include First Dude Todd Palin. The question is, will that vote take place before the election? And it's not clear whether it will.
To what degree is tonight's news and the now uncertainty, as you describe it, that anything will happen before the election, to what degree is this a result of the McCain campaign airlifting a lot of lawyers and operatives out there to try to stop this investigation?
Right. Well, look, there was a calculated decision made, no question about it, shortly after Sarah Palin's selection as vice president, that this was a potential minefield for the McCain campaign. You had a bipartisan unanimous vote by the Legislative Council, the management body for the Alaska Legislature, to conduct this investigation. The deadline, and this is before Sarah Palin was even contemplated as a vice presidential nominee, was going to be October 31st. So once the selection was made, I think the McCain people, who whether or not they fully realized this before Sarah Palin's selection, suddenly realized it right after, that they were facing this potential October surprise of a damning report by the state legislature, which even if it didn't find illegal acts by the governor, could question her credibility on the eve of the election. So ever since, there has been a concerted effort by the McCain campaign. As we talked about a couple of nights ago, a top lawyer for the McCain campaign was flown to Alaska as part of this rapid response team and made the argument repeatedly that the investigation was tainted by politics, that the guy in charge of it, Hollis French, was a Obama supporter, Obama contributor, who was making comments to the press that he shouldn't have made, that suggested that this investigation was going to be embarrassing to the governor. And frankly, Hollis French did say things that he shouldn't have said. He's acknowledged that the results could be damaging to the governor. It could be an October surprise. So he played into the hands of the McCain campaign, and the result is a political mess right now where the waters have been successfully muddied and the underlying issues have been obscured.
Michael, we're just about out of time here because we're going to go talk to Tony Knowles, who's the former governor of Alaska, about this. But I have one last quick question for you. Did the Obama campaign ever send people to Alaska to work on this?
Well, they've certainly been monitoring it very closely. There have been suggestions that they did. In fact, the McCain campaign had an ad showing wolves from the Obama campaign. I was up in Alaska last week and didn't see any. That doesn't mean they didn't exist. If they are there, they're keeping a pretty low profile.
Yeah, just incredible. Michael Isikoff, investigative correspondent with Newsweek magazine, thank you as always.
Thank you.
If you are not from Alaska and you've ever considered even Alaska politics before Sarah Palin hopped a flight to Ohio to be tapped as the GOP VP choice, you might have known about the Bridge to Nowhere. The Bridge to Nowhere 7 felony indictment guy, Senator Ted Stevens. Remember him? The guy who said this about the old computer box machine thingy?
The internet is not something that you just dump something on. It's not a big truck. It's a series of tubes.
Ted Stevens, everybody. Then there's Congressman Don Young, who would go to any lengths, even carnivorous lengths, to settle a political score.
If we continue this, what we call biting one another, very much like the mink in my state that killed their own. So I am a little frustrated, and like I say, those that bite me will be bitten back.
And in Alaska, Sarah Palin's home state, Senator Stevens, the 7-count felony indictment guy, he's running for re-election, and he might make it. The latest poll from Rasmussen shows the currently indicted incumbent senator is running just 2 points behind his opponent, Anchorage Mayor Mark Begich, who in a bold departure for Alaska politics faces 0 felony counts. As for Congressman Bites Like a Mink Don Young, despite being a target of the same federal corruption investigation that indicted Senator Stevens, Don Young won his state's Republican primary last night. Of course he did. We haven't even mentioned the 3 other Alaskan state lawmakers already convicted for a variety of corruption and or bribery charges. The point is, what's to fear from little old Troopergate? Even the worst case scenario wouldn't get Sarah Palin up on the varsity team among Alaska Republican lawmakers. We are joined now by former Alaska Governor Tony Knowles, who lost the governorship in a close race with Sarah Palin in 2006. Mr. Knowles was not involved in Troopergate, though he has had an up-close perspective on the Palin administration. Governor Knowles, thanks for joining us.
Rachel, thanks for having me.
From your perspective, how serious are the Troopergate charges?
Well, from a perspective as a former governor for 8 years, the charges are very serious. Basically, what you're saying is that a person abused their power of office, potentially committed an illegal act in directing a public safety commissioner to do an illegal act, and when he didn't comply with not only the direction that possibly came from the governor, but from the governor's husband, the attorney general, and other officers within the administration, he was then fired. I think that's a very serious charge. And the legislature, as you and Michael very well discussed it, and I don't have a lot more to add to it in that regard, in a bipartisan way said that there was enough evidence to initiate an ethics investigation. That's never happened before in Alaska history. So it was a very serious issue. The council that voted on that was 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats. So it was certainly bipartisan. And now we've seen through the firestorm of maneuvers of the McCain-Palin campaign in attempting to shut down this investigation that it is becoming very apparent that it's a case of cover-up and stonewalling.
On the issue of questioning the integrity of the investigation, is there any reason to believe what the McCain and Palin campaign are sort of alleging about the investigation after the fact, that it was a partisan witch hunt, that it was tainted, that it had become a tool of the Obama campaign in some way? Do you buy those allegations at all? It looks like by making those allegations, they've succeeded in pushing this investigation off till after the presidential election.
Yeah, this is politics as usual in the worst kind of way, by coming in and attempting to, through distractions, through accusations. And the lawyer that they brought in from New York and a former governor spokeswoman the other day really defamed Walt Monaghan, the former public safety commissioner, a man who for 35 years as a cop and as a police chief and a public safety commissioner and as a former Marine has served America in this state very well. And by defaming him, just an attempt to gain a political edge, along with the actions of the Attorney General telling people to disobey the law and not testify even though they were subpoenaed, that is an unfortunate politics as usual, and they were not advertised as it. They're supposed to be the reformers of this, and I think we're unfortunately seeing just the opposite.
Why does Sarah Palin have such a high approval rating in Alaska?
Well, having been a governor when the price of oil was $16 a barrel and went to $9 a barrel, and we had to reduce our budget because the oil revenues for this state provide 85% of the budget. There was a $5 billion surplus last year. So what's
not to like?
Be popular with that kind of surplus and have that kind of a budget? She increased the budget 60%. It's a difficult. It's not a difficult challenge.
It's also not an easy way to describe being a fiscal conservative, but I guess that's a conversation for another day. Former Alaska Governor Tony Knowles, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rachel.